the Paycheck Fairness Act, back in 2010, you were writing about this. It was the last time that it was, seriously advanced. Now Harry Reid is talking about bringing it back up again, basically saying that women should have a legal fallback if they find that their employer is paying them less than a man for the exact same job. Am I accurately characterizing the law, first of all?
No, it's not the exact same job. We all believe and support the present law, which calls for equal pay for equal work. But that's not what the feminists want. And, of course, the Obama administration and his pals do whatever the feminists want. They can really control his administration. They want equal pay for equal worth. Now, worth is a very subjective statement. You might think one job is worth more than another. When you talk about worth, you're talking about other conditions that might be part of the job. And that is not something that ought to be legislated by the government. We'll leave something to the free market, the employer and the employee.
Sure. Well, you and I are both old enough to remember the days of newspaper ads that said men wanted and women wanted, and the just open disparities in the workplace based on gender. How do we, if we don't use something like the Paycheck Paycheck Fairness Act, or whatever it's called, if we don't do that, how do we prevent men who overwhelmingly control the workplace from discriminating against women with regard to money, particularly in this day and age when more and more single women or single mothers are literally, the main paycheck or the only paycheck that's providing for a household?
Well, what is the purpose? Is the purpose to get all women in the workforce? I don't think that's an appropriate government purpose. I think people should have their opportunity to go for a job if they want it, and if they apply for it, do the work. Right. But I don't think that we should craft the laws to make sure that women get in to the workforce in equal numbers.
Well, I'm not suggesting that. I'm asking the question, and this isn't a gotcha question. I genuinely don't have an answer for this. I think that, though, this is what this bill is trying to do, is how do you protect women who are currently in the workforce, who are in a workforce that is male-controlled, male-dominated, and has a long history of paying women less than men, in some cases for the same job and in many cases for similar jobs. How do we...
Well, we've got a whole federal department called the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and all those busybody bureaucrats have the job of making sure that women get equal pay for equal work. And I think that's a good law, and they've got plenty of bureaucrats who are dealing with that. So what is the problem? A lot of men think women control the workforce.
I don't know any men who think that.
At any rate, there are plenty of women who simply don't want the same treatment as men. For example, most women don't want to work the full week that men work. Men want full-time jobs. Women want the ability to knock it off and take shorter hours so they can be home with their family and do other things.
Well, I'd like the ability to knock it off and take shorter hours, too. I think
so there is this new phenomenon. I've learned a new word in recent years. It's hypergamy. When women get married, they like the gender gap. They want to marry a man who earns more than she does.
Hypergamy?
Hypergamy.
And what does that word mean?
It means that the woman wants to marry a man who makes more money than she does. So that when she has a baby or she gets tired of the rat race in the workforce, she can take off or work fewer hours.
Well, I can understand some women feeling that way. I can understand some men feeling that way. Wanting to marry a woman who's
it's overwhelmingly women who feel that way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, be that or not, okay. I think that we've probably hashed this one out. I'm curious if we could go back to where we started. Your thoughts on judicial review these days, on the idea that, in the first 70 years of our republic, it only happened twice that the Supreme Court said we have the right to strike down laws passed by Congress. Once in 1803 and in what was it? Marbury versus Madison, and then the second in 1856 in Dred Scott, and we all know how that worked out. But now that's pretty much all they do is basically make law. What are your thoughts on that today?
Well, the name of my book is The Supremacists. These judges get to think they're supreme over everybody else, and I don't think they are. And I think we now have all of these supremacist judges that are knocking down the state marriage laws, and I think it's an outrage. And I think we should act the way Dred Scott did, the way Lincoln did about Dred Scott when the Supreme Court handed down the worst decision on record and said that Dred Scott was the property of his master. Lincoln said, well, okay, we have to go along with whatever the court ruled about that poor guy, but we don't need to make it a national rule, because if we let the Supreme Court make national rules like that, we will no longer be a self-governing people, and we will be subject to that eminent tribunal. And I think the courts are just out of line. That's why I call them supremacists. I think the American people should stop it.
I absolutely agree with you. In fact, I think that's one of the biggest crises that we face as a democracy is that we now have a constitutional monarchy. We have 9 monarchs here in Washington, D.C., 3 blocks from where I'm sitting, who basically are making our laws rather than we the people. What can we do about this? We have just a minute left, Phyllis Schlafly.
Well, we want to make sure we don't confirm any more Obama judges.
Okay.
Because his judges are the ones he's appointed are the supremacist type.
What about an Article?
Starters,
what about an Article 3, Section 2 sort of solution where Congress regulates the Supreme Court?
Well, Congress doesn't regulate the Supreme Court, but what Congress can do is to withdraw jurisdiction over those areas where we don't trust the court. And we don't trust them to remake the definition of marriage. That's not the court's job. That's a legislative function.
Right.
And we don't trust what they've been doing on a lot of religion cases, on the Boy Scouts, and a lot of other things.
Yeah, I'm with you. We may disagree on some of the individual issues, but in principle, I am totally with you.